Well, in my new narrative history of the United States, Land of Promise, an economic history of the United States, I look at the interaction between waves of technology-driven economic change in America since the very earliest years of the Republic in the 1790s, and their relationship with waves of political change. I argue that great transformations of the economy by technological innovation, be it the steam engine, the internal combustion engine and electricity, or more recently, transistors, computers, and the internet, produce transformations of the way we live and do business. And this means that regulatory systems, laws, and often political institutions lag behind by a generation or so until they're modernized in what often is a very cataclysmic, accelerated period of reform, such as the American Revolution, the Civil War and Reconstruction, and the New Deal and World War II. One of my arguments is that the United States now is on the verge of another transformation of politics and institutions in order to catch up with an economy which is racing ahead of our somewhat anachronistic and antiquated political order, largely because the transformation of the economy by the information technology revolution, which was rooted in the 1930s and World War II, but only really began transforming one economic sector after another in the 1980s and 1990s. That transformation is reaching its peak. However, our regulatory systems, our welfare state, and much of the way we govern the economy is still rooted in the New Deal period, which was a response to the last wave of technological innovation, that of the so-called Second Industrial Revolution, based on electricity, automobiles, and aviation. History doesn't have easily laid out answers to our contemporary questions. It has suggestions at most. Mark Twain once said that history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. And I think by looking at how earlier generations of American policymakers responded to the challenges created by earlier waves of technological innovation, that will give us some ideas of how to respond to the increasing misalignment of a political system that was last refurbished during the New Deal era and the Civil Rights Revolution half a century ago, and our increasingly high-tech global economy. Let me give you a couple of examples of this kind of misalignment between the economy and our political system. When our laws governing corporations were last revised, it was during the New Deal era, when banking and manufacturing were almost entirely national. Now, of course, we have global finance and transnational production taking place on many continents, but both our national systems of regulation and global systems have not really caught up to the challenge of this. Another example of misalignment between our institutions and our technology-transformed economy has to do with unemployment benefits. The present unemployment benefit system was designed essentially to help laid-off industrial workers during recessions on the assumption that there would be a rapid recovery and they would be hired again. What we've seen in the last couple of recessions is that the periods of unemployment last longer and longer. And during that time, because of the rapid pace of technology-driven change, sometimes the industry from which they were laid off is not there for the laid-off workers to return to. So we really need to seriously rethink the role of conventional unemployment insurance for a world in which the typical unemployed worker is not a Detroit factory worker who in effect is temporarily on leave during a short-term business downturn. There's a hunger in the country for a narrative that will describe where we are in history and where we go from here. And I hope Land of Promise can address some of that need. Unfortunately, the conventional narratives tend to be those formed in the last cycle, so that a lot of the debate essentially is unchanged from New Deal liberals who simply focused on more regulation or expansions of social insurance. However worthwhile that might be, it doesn't address the fundamental questions of the mismatch between national institutions and this tech-driven global economy. At the same time, the emphasis on small businesses by conservatives, but also by many centrists and progressives, tends to reflect a kind of old nostalgic vision of the U.S. economy based on small farms and self-employed business executives and merchants. of a kind that really has not existed since the first and second industrial revolutions and is not likely to come back in the near future. So there's always a tension between clear-eyed analysis of what's going on in the world and nostalgia for earlier eras of American economics and society. And nostalgia sells politically, which is one reason why the great innovators in American politics, including Abraham Lincoln and Franklin Roosevelt in these earlier periods of transformation and modernization, they tended to portray their innovations as a restoration of a golden past, rather than what they actually were, which was improvising to come up with a new system for new circumstances.
Now let's get into this officer, what they told you, and elaborate on this information.
Shall do. I got a call the day before yesterday in the morning from this officer, former officer. He's retired, but he was quite upset that one of the people he'd encouraged to join the military was being squeezed out, that he was forced to resign his commission. And it was because a question was asked of him. Now, I've called it a litmus test, but basically what it is, he was asked if in a scenario, if in a situation where the military was called upon to go and confront people who were armed, American citizens who would not relinquish their arms, in spite of the Second Amendment right to hold arms, would you fire on American citizens? This gentleman related to me that the officer was totally flummoxed that he would be asked this question. And he said his answer was no, I would not fire on American citizens. It was my military contact who said it is so obvious to him, so obvious to the man that was resigning, that what they were setting up was a takeover, a total takeover by Obama, and using the military to have it happen. And if the military will not, if they'll not give the right answer to this litmus test, they've got a whole army of young kids who don't know any better ready to move in.
Wait a minute. So your military source knows about the FEMA Corps. Now, this isn't secret, but it's not well known to the public. Describe what he told you about that, about the Yugen squads from about, what, 17 down to 14?
Well, his words exactly were, here's the Hitler Youth being resurrected now under this name of Obama Corps. That's exactly what he said.
Oh, my, this is devastating. I've got family that told me years ago I was right about everything, but now won't even talk to me, who's in the Army. I mean, this is because they've been passed over promotion just because they're related to me. And, I mean, this is amazing that this is going on.
You know, the vice president of my company in the U.S. is a guy named Eric Rush, who happens to be a black guy who's a journalist in your country. Well, you know what I did for him yesterday? I purchased him an AR-15 and a sidearm, because I am so worried about the things that are being said right now. He's out there putting it out through WorldNet Daily, I think is the name, putting the word out, letting people know the dangers of what, are you ready for this? What China is demanding of Obama.
No. China, we broke it a month ago, the Drudge Report, drudgereport.com link to it. Their People's Daily, I know you're in China and been there, you know it. Their TV said, you will, quote, have a war against your gun owners. We're ready to back you, and they're the biggest owner of the debt. And then I've got a Daily Beast article where they said, it's good that Piers Morgan is leading the anti-gun deal. We need to get Americans used to foreigners running things. I mean, this is insane. Go break down what's happening in China.
Well, what's happening in China is they know, well, first of all, do you know that the Chinese call Obama the monkey man? Do you know that?
I've seen that in the news, yes.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with him being black. It has everything to do with the way they treat monkeys. Monkeys are like puppets in China. So Obama is looked upon as a puppet of China. That's how he's looked upon. And they know full well that when he comes hat in hand, begging for more dollars, they're going to make more demands. The information that's available to some people about what's going on in China and how they're treating the American land and the American resources, they're treating it as this, it is something which they will be able to grab sometime soon. And so the fact that they now have 5 special economic zones throughout the United States, you've got to be aware of what's happening. The fact that discussions have taken place with Obama and some of his officials in China to talk about.
The NAFTA superhighway is their invasion route from the Pacific side of Mexico right into the U.S., and they're going to be brought in. I've talked to top officers, but it's even in the Washington Post, agreements to bring in, under NLE 09, troops from 15 nations to quell domestic unrest. That's at FEMA.gov. And guess who was on the list of the 15 nations?
Who? Wouldn't be China, would it?
Oh, yeah. That's what I'm telling listeners. It's all, and people say that'll never happen. Once they start a civil war, it will.
Yeah, it's already happening. They're setting it up for civil war. They're setting it up to take away the freedom of the American people. And Obama, he doesn't believe in freedom. The Chinese are demanding that Obama take control of the guns because as they move in and steal the resources of America, buy them out in satisfaction of the debt, which Obama knows full well he cannot pay. When you know you're not going to be able to pay your credit card, why don't you run it up as far as you can? As long as they're saying yes, right? Get as much goodies as you possibly can. That's the mindset of Obama.
Well,
and he knows full well he will never have to actually pay the debt. All he has to do is say, hey, we've already shut down the oil industry. They're not drilling. We'll give you permission to drill. We've already destroyed the coal industry in America. So come, take the coal. You can use it. It's a better coal than you have in China. They need it. They need the resources of America, and that's what they are demanding from Obama. You are right on the money. And keep in mind something. Yamamoto was right when he said, you don't want to invade America because behind every blade of grass there'll be a gun. And you know, the Chinese know full well that's exactly the situation with America right now. Obama knows. He's got his marching orders. He's been told to take your guns. He's been told to have your people crushed so that the Chinese can do what they want.
Action speaks louder than words. If Obama wants to take practical measures to control guns, he has to make preparation for a protracted war and considerable political cost. Then they go on to say the Chinese government's ready to help.
There's a huge, I'm going to say it because there's the word, there's conspiracy, there's complicity all over the United States. And, you know, your poor military people are sitting there. They know, they are aware, they know the manipulation, they know the expectations that they will be called upon to move against the American people. These people are heartsick. They're heartsick of the portent of having to turn their guns against their own people. And so they're walking out